when I was growing up, I had a friend when I was in high school who was a literal genius. Do you guys have any friends that are like, okay, like they're smart people and then they're just like straight up geniuses? Do you have any friends like that? Are you that friend? Are you? Okay. So there are two tests that most colleges accept whenever you're taking a test to see if like you're ready to go to college. It's the ACT and the SAT. Have you guys heard of those before? They're no longer doing those or whatever because of COVID. Oh, it's optional. Who's going to take that option? I'm sorry. So it's not happening. Okay. But that's good to know. So they weren't optional whenever I was applying for college. And actually they had like prep tests, like you could go and you could study up. I didn't even know that existed. The ACT in Oklahoma is what they usually accepted. And that is on a scale of 36. Like if you miss 0 questions, you get a 36. If you miss 1 question, you get a 35. If you miss 2 questions, you get a 34, and so on. What you needed to be able to automatically get accepted to college was like a 24. It was like, and then I met people that got like 19s and 18s. I'm like, okay, so people can just get in. That's fine. But I had a friend. He was so smart that he literally just showed up, no studying, and he got a 32. It blew my mind. Like he literally didn't spend any time studying, and actually, on like the pre-SAT, he showed up to that after we had just been gone for a whole week on a band trip where like we didn't sleep, and he gets back the next day. I didn't even know this test was happening, and he shows up and he gets a good enough score to be a National Merit Scholar. Like get his college paid for, kind of wherever he wants to go. I remember freshman year we were hanging out, and he had a new computer. I was like, dude, how'd you get a new computer? He's like, yeah, that's part of my scholarship. I was like, what happened, man? Like, come on. So growing up, like in high school, he was the guy that I compared myself to. So for a long time, I just thought I was dumb. Like I had to work a little bit harder. I didn't study a ton in high school. But the reality was he just didn't have to study, and he showed up, and he got an A in everything. And so he was the guy that I compared myself to. And it was because in high school, I was preoccupied with intelligence. Like that was such an important thing to me, was like whether I was smart or not, whether I was intelligent. And in the 21st century, actually we're all, I think, very concerned with like how do we stack up? How do we measure up against other people? How smart am I? Like, am I smarter than that guy? Or am I smarter than that girl? Is she smarter than me? Am I dumb? And so, I mean, we're really preoccupied with intelligence. It's kind of the yardstick or the measuring stick that we use whenever we're trying to figure out where we match up against people around us. And so, yeah. Whenever I looked around high school, no matter who was around, if that guy was around, I was like, okay, I'm dumb as a rock. And it took me actually a long time to figure out later that, okay, actually I'm not dumb, but that was the guy I was comparing with. And it took me even longer to figure out that actually being intelligent isn't something that God is very concerned with. It's actually not even a category that's in the Bible. That was really helpful for me to find out later. But nowhere in the passages of the Bible is the word smart or intelligent used. The word stupid is used to talk about really dumb things that people have done. But the word intelligent, it's just not a part of God's vocabulary to describe us. Now, some of you might be like internally cheering right now. You're like, Andrew's telling me I don't have to do good in school. No. Can I just get everyone to nod and be like, Andrew's not telling me that I can do bad in school? Because that's a part of your responsibility. You're supposed to do as good as you can. So, but instead of being smart or dumb, the categories that we find in the Bible are wise or foolish. So, I mean, being smart is like having a lot of knowledge, knowing just kind of what things are, and being able to regurgitate that on a test. So you test intelligence with, you can do it with IQ tests. The amount of knowledge that you have in a certain area is tested by your tests in school. That's something that happens regularly. But wisdom, actually, the way God defines it is learning to understand how the world works, how God's created the world, but also not just knowing that, but knowing how to then honor God as you move around in that world. As you read what's happening in one situation, you act in a way that God would honor God. So it's this practical use of knowledge, ultimately to honor God with our lives. And so that's what wisdom really is. So, I mean, you can be really smart and dumb at the same time. When I say dumb, I'm not like trying to be mean. I'm not trying to like but when I say dumb, I mean like not wise. You can be really smart and not wise at the same time. You guys know who Sheldon is? When I just say Sheldon, you're like, oh yeah, I know who that is. Where's the picture? Yeah, that dude. I mean, do you think he's like wise? Have you guys seen the show? You guys know anything about his? Yeah, some people are like, yeah, I've seen The Big Bang Theory. It's fine. Or you like Young Sheldon? I've never watched Young Sheldon. But the reality is, I would say he's like really smart, but he is not wise. He's probably a foolish person. But we are called to see life God's way, and also to act in a way that would honor Him as well. So as a church, we're in the middle of reading through this major series called Quick Truth Through the Bible, where we're reading through the Old and New Testament, different portions of it, and we're looking to see Jesus from Genesis to Revelation, the very beginning of the Bible, all the way to the end. We're looking for Jesus throughout. And so in our reading this week, we looked at the wisest man in recorded history. It was said of him that for his time, there was no one that was wiser than King Solomon. And so what I want to do today is to look at how his story, what we can take away from him as a person in general, but then also what we can take from his story and apply to our lives today. And actually some of the decisions he made are affecting us even today. So King Solomon was actually a pretty young man when he took over for his dad, King David. He took his place as the king of Israel. And actually David still is considered to be the best king in Israel's history. Even thousands of years later, people look back and like, yeah, he was the guy. He was the best. And so can you imagine the shoes that he had to fill and the pressure that was on him as a young man as he literally took over to lead this country? So he wanted to do a good job. He knew he had big shoes to fill. He was the second king. He was the first king after his father David. And he literally was really worried about what he was going to do. So what he did, he knew this was God's kingdom. This was God's country. And so he wanted to go and worship God and actually seek God for advice on how he was to lead God's people. So I think that was a really wise idea. And actually, while he was there worshiping, he went to an altar to worship God. He went on a trip, and it was a really big time for him to go and worship. And actually, as he was worshiping, God came to him in a dream and basically said, ask for whatever you want me to give you. So in this dream, God literally comes to Solomon and is like, hey, what do you want? I mean, that's a pretty tempting offer. Like, what would you guys want? Like a new PS5, straight A's, $1 billion? Everyone's like, yeah, all those sound pretty good to me, but I'd probably ask for $1 billion because I could buy like 500 million PlayStation 5s. Right? Okay, cool. We're on the same page. But here's actually how King Solomon answers in 1 Kings 3, verses 6 through 9. Solomon answered, you have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? So I want us to get two takeaways from this interaction with Solomon. So the first is that wise people are humble people. So what is humility? This is a question I have for you guys. What is humility? Yo, what's up? You said it's like shame? That's a good thought. We're on the right track. What do you think, Courtney? Embarrassment? You think humility is embarrassment? Are you guys thinking about like being humiliated? Okay. That's close. It shares a similar idea. What do you think?
Humility is only taking what you need and
Okay.
not taking what you want. That's so much part of it. I know how to describe it.
Yeah, sure.
Very complicated.
Yeah, it's multifaceted. There's lots of different faces to humility. It looks a little bit different and kind of like a diamond. What do you think? Yeah, so being able to admit your own faults, like, hey, I'm not perfect. Look at this stuff that I've messed up. Yeah, those are all, I think, one thing you're articulating is that, like, sometimes it's hard to describe it, but you know it when you see it. It's like that running back who he just scores a touchdown, he destroys the other team, and he just like trots over and hands the ball to the ref and goes back. He doesn't like do the crazy dance or like whatever. I like in my mind that's a pretty good picture of like, okay, that dude's pretty humble. I like that guy. You know, he's not showboating. So it is multifaceted. So what that word means is there's lots of faces to it, kind of like a diamond. It's multifaceted. So what that means, one way it's been described is voluntarily taking a position of lower importance. So it's kind of putting other people first, like understanding like, hey, the world doesn't revolve around me. I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to let this person go ahead or do this or have this opportunity. John Piper, a pastor, says that it's the opposite to the sense of entitlement. So what's entitlement? Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, thinking I deserve stuff. Like, yeah, that's mine. I deserve it. I'm entitled. Yeah, that's right. So one of the values that we have as a church is actually considering putting others' goals and interests above your own. That's how you can show humility. So considering others as more important than yourselves, that's Philippians 2, 3, and 4. And then another way it's been described is not thinking less of yourself, like, oh, I'm so terrible, but it's actually just thinking about yourself less. Basically, you're taking the spotlight of your life off yourself, and you're putting it on God and other people. So at the root of it, it's really understanding your place in the created order. So God is the one that's above everyone. He is the creator, and we were what was created. So God is God, we're not, and so we live to follow him and live to give our lives to him. And so we know that Solomon was humble. Did you see how he approached God? He was literally like, you have given me the huge honor of leading your people, God. And he says, I'm but a little child. And we don't actually think he was like a little kid, but what he's saying is like, God, I need your help. I really don't know what to do. And he wouldn't be able to lead them without God's help. So super humble. So what's the opposite of humility? What do you guys think that is? Hey, what's up? Yes. Nailed it. Yes. Is that up there? Where? Way to go, John Piper. Yeah, okay, so that is accurate. I wholeheartedly agree. What are some other words to describe it? So if you were to describe something, would you call them entitled? Is that a word that you would regularly use? That's fair. I guess we're in Huntington Beach. Just a word that happens a lot. What's up? Yeah. Yeah. Proud or arrogant. Yeah, I think all those words work. So this is actually the natural bent of our hearts, is really to be self-centered, entitled, to think that we just deserve things. Without earning it, we just think we deserve so many things. We put ourselves first. That's just the natural way that we go. But you've been around arrogant people that are just all about themselves. Do you feel like cool around those people? No, I don't. Do you feel good when you're around them? Are you like built up? Are you encouraged? I don't know. There's no way. Whenever I'm around someone, it's like, oh man, I need to really pray for this person. It's one of those things like, okay, this is not a relationship where I'm going to be uplifted. So I really need to buckle up and love this person. So humility is actually the key to good friendships and relationships. It's when you're putting other people first, like they actually feel cared for and respected and encouraged and loved. And so this is actually one of the key to really good relationships. Solomon knew that he would need to be about God and treat people how God would want him to have a lasting kingdom. He wanted to get this right. He knew he needed to get this right. So that brings us to the second point. A wise person looks for wisdom from God rather than short-sighted fixes. Short-sighted fixes. So when someone is short-sighted, what does that mean? Yeah, what's up?
Someone who doesn't look that far into the future.
Yeah. It's like the future is, how long does it take for Amazon Prime to get to my house? Like 2 days. During COVID, it was like a week one time. So yeah, exactly. So usually they're focused on the now. They're not actually thinking about the consequences to their decisions. They're just like, I'm all about now. This is what I want. I'm going to do it. I'm short-sighted. It's the people, like they just really don't want to save any money. Someone that's short-sighted doesn't think about the future will take care of itself. But looking at his life, Solomon could see his problem. His problem, his very real problem in front of him was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And he actually has the most important job in his whole country. So he's like, I really need to get this one right. I need to know what I'm doing. And so he had enemies from other countries. The whole process of him becoming king, one of the reasons why he's praising God that he was now the king and that God had blessed David by giving him a son on his throne is because, a long time ago, like a peaceful transition of power in countries was like what people fought wars over. There were mutinies where people were literally like going in to kill the king so they could be on the sea. So people were being backstabbed all over the place. And so this is actually something that was pretty amazing that Solomon was able to take over for his dad. In fact, one of his brothers even tried to raise up, and there was some really bad stuff happening between him and other people. So he had a lot of like really specific problems in that moment. He could have looked at the neighboring countries or his enemies and asked God to just defeat them. He could have asked God to make him the richest king so he could buy everything that he wanted. And he could have actually asked God to make all the people in his country love him and respect him. But each one of these and many other things he could have asked for. But what he realized is that if he got the answer for one of those, it would only solve one of his immediate problems. He'd be short-sighted if he just asked for God to give him money or to defeat his enemy. And what he realized is that he needed something that would bring long-term success and long-term help. So he said, God, give me a discerning heart, one that can tell what is good and what is bad. So God later describes this as a discerning and wise heart. Discerning means being able to understand or recognize something, like literally to tell the difference between something, to know, oh, that's a good person or a bad person. Like that's someone I should trust, that's someone I shouldn't trust. Like to be able to discern between people. So specifically, though, he needed to be able to discern what was happening in the different situations that would be brought before him as the king, so he would know what to do. And then that's the second thing is that he needs to know the difference between like what's good and what's evil. He needed to know the difference between right and wrong in the different situations throughout his life. He needed wisdom because that would actually carry him through his rule and his reign for years and years to come. And for all the decisions that he'd be making, he'd be able to make the best decision going forward rather than just solving one of his problems. And so God's response was, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life. So when we look for wisdom from God, he gives us long-term solutions and blessings that we couldn't have seen. In fact, because Solomon asked for wisdom, God gave him all the other things as well. They were something that came out of his wisdom. So the reality for us, though, is that we are short-sighted people. We can't look into the future, and we can kind of remember the past, but God has a bird's eye view. He's able to see the whole picture. In fact, he's the designer. That means that as we learn to walk with him in his ways, that we will see God working in our lives. And we can know that as we trust him, we're moving into the future that he really wants for us. And it's going to be a good one filled with a deeper relationship with him, with a fruitful life for his kingdom, one that's good. But we're talking about finding Jesus in the passages of the Bible. And we're in the Old Testament. Jesus hasn't really come on the scene yet. And so I want to look at how this relates to Jesus, even though it's in the Old Testament. So the first step in looking for wisdom from God, actually for us today, is to decide to follow Jesus Christ. In the New Testament, Jesus is described as the wisdom of God. So perfect wisdom has a face and it has a name, and it's Jesus Christ. And actually, as we learn to walk with him, to know who he is, and we become more like him, we will actually be growing in the same kind of wisdom that you find in the pages of the Old Testament. So Jesus, he's really the gatekeeper to all wisdom. And as we learn to follow him, we will basically be growing in godly wisdom that won't let us down, that won't necessarily solve every single of our short-term problems, but in the long term, we will see God faithfully work in our lives. And so he gives us wisdom to do that. So I found out later in life that I was pretty me-focused. I was really just kind of focused on myself and what I wanted, and that caused me to be proud, which is the opposite of what a wise person is. I was really concerned, like I mentioned earlier, with like how I stacked up against other people. I was just stuck in this comparison thing. I was like, man, is that guy smarter than me? And then I would let that determine like my outlook, my attitude. And so my genius friend, he was a constant source of humility. I just didn't recognize it until later, because whenever I'd compare, I'd be like, yeah, I don't measure up. That dude's so smart. It's ridiculous. And in those moments, instead of being like, God, this actually isn't important to you. That's great. You made him really smart. That's your plan for his life. But God, you've given me a different plan. That's okay. You've made me different. That's okay. But, I didn't have that perspective, but I hope that you can have a better perspective than I did. So how can you be humble? I would encourage you, ask and pray for God to help you look for the proud thoughts or the arrogant thoughts that you have throughout the day. These are usually thoughts that are like questioning and judging the actions of others. Usually it's us just like, oh, that was so dumb. I have some examples of some thoughts up here. Or it might be even saying these to your friends. You can tell you're proud if you're saying, I know better than to do that. I can't believe they did that. Can you believe they did? Then you start gossiping about them. What you're really doing is basically like, they're so dumb. I'm way smarter than them. That's proud. That's arrogant. Or I'd never do something that stupid. Or I could have done better. Or, are you serious? Can you believe they did that? Those are just the ones that like happen in my brain. I'm sure yours sound similar, maybe have different words. But these are all thoughts that reveal how smart you think you are and how dumb you think someone else is. When those pop up, they really need to be a warning to us that we're moving into pride. I'd encourage you, as these thoughts are popping up, rather than just giving into them and like, yeah, really let them have it, use this as a moment to pause and be like, oh, wow, I'm really stepping in the path towards pride and arrogance, towards foolishness rather than wisdom. So I'd encourage you in those moments, tell God what you're thinking and confess that to him. And confess that like you're really looking down on someone else. And ask him for the ability to really see them the way that he designed them. To really, if they did something or they said something that's like, oh man, I can't believe they did that. Well, why did they do that? Maybe they need some help. Maybe they need you to pray for them. Maybe they actually haven't decided to follow Jesus and they don't have the Holy Spirit inside of them helping them to make different decisions. And maybe that could be you. You could be someone that really loves them and accepts them and talks to them and is kind to them even if they're not doing the smartest thing. Maybe that could be your role in their life, to see them differently. Because whenever we start to walk in wisdom, we also are learning to also grow and love other people. Because that's also, as we learn to follow Jesus and become more like him, we will also be more loving. So there's a really big connection there. So when we stop trying to measure up against everyone else, we can take the time to really be a genuine help. So I encourage you guys, in your groups today, we're going to be looking at 1 Kings 3, the story. You'll get into it a little bit more. And so I'd encourage you guys really focus on how this can apply to your life, specifically this week. Like, what thoughts have you had this week that were like, oh man, okay, that was out of bounds. That was pretty arrogant. Or I was really judging, like I was really looking down on that person, trying to build myself up. Look for those thoughts and think about how you can begin to take those captive and go a different way. Let's pray. God, thank you that we can know you, that we can walk with you. I pray that, God, in these groups tonight, the students would be able to really discuss how to apply this to their lives. Holy Spirit, I pray that you would reveal to them just one area of this in their lives that they can begin, by your help, to make a change towards humility and towards wisdom. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen.